Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me on this sunny February afternoon. I really do appreciate everyone taking the time out to speak about you, speak about your identity. Let me also start by saying happy Black History Month, happy Black Excellence Month, happy February. And also happy soon to be Valentine's Day for those that celebrate it. Um, for those that are new to our webinars, joining today or watching the recorded version, thank you. My name is Cassandra Francis, and I am the founder and clinical director and one of the psychotherapists at One Piece Therapy as well. Those that are new, those that are familiar with joining, I'm sure you already, know the spiel and everything. So welcome back. Today we will again be talking about you and how you would describe your identity. So, yes, this is a big question with many layers and many parts to the answer. Some would even say this is $1 million question. And since it is a very complex answer that is worth a lot, I really do encourage you to give space to yourself and be reflective. Please engage with me using the comment section or your voice or the chats. Just please do engage, as our webinar today is more reflective based, it's more discussion based than it is psychoeducational. However, of course, as we always do, we will give tools towards the end. But as it is Black History Month, Black people, us, we deserve throughout the year, but in particular also in Black History Month, to feel highlighted, celebrated, and honored. And again, you deserve to do that and give that to yourself. So let's get right into what today looks like. The agenda is we will be defining what identity means in a very objective way, even though it's also a subjective definition. Having some time for reflection, talking about what makes up your identity and the parts of you. Again, having another discussion and also learning ways to get to the core of you, right? I did put questions at the end of the webinar, but as I mentioned already, please engage with me throughout as you feel fit. So, what does identity mean? Very objectively, even though this is my created definition, it's your sense of self, right? So, the core of your identity is typically steady across time, yet it evolves, it deepens, it strengthens as you get older. It can be the relation established between psychological identification. It can be very distinguished between a person and their character or personality. Generally, it's how you feel about yourself and your sense of self. So right off the bat, I would like to open it up to everyone attending and watching this today. I'm curious to how would you describe your identity? Yes, Dina, go ahead.
Hi, Cassandra, and hi everyone. My name is Dina. This is the first time I've joined a webinar like this, so looking very forward to the discussion. I just wanted to answer the question how I would describe my identity. So I do feel like my identity is what makes me me, and it's sort of a mix between my personality, my beliefs, my values, and everything that I've experienced throughout my life. So what I identify as is an Eritrean woman, a Christian. I am. I would like to say that I'm also. I also identify as, a kind, docile, spirited sort of person, and that I also identify as a project coordinator. That is my profession, what I do right now. So my experience, as in my work experience, I also identify as that. So there's so many things that can come into what you identify as you said, Cassandra. It's a whole bunch of, it's a broad thing. So yeah, that's what I identify as.
Thank you, Dina. I really do appreciate your vulnerability and your authenticity. Absolutely. And it's nice that you already touched on certain things we'll be talking about today, but truly the different parts of you makes the sum of your whole identity, right? Did you want to add more to that?
No, I said I agree. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. I believe Heather. Thank you, Heather. Go ahead.
Thank you. Happy to be here. This is such an interesting question, but I find a lot of times how I identify myself depends on where I am and who I'm with, because I'm always the same person, but different parts of my identity are more present. So I'm a mom. I have 3 almost grown kids, and I identify as that, but not at work, not so much, because it just doesn't come up as much, but it's such a core of who I am. I'm over 50, so I have gray hair, and that's always present for me. And because I have gray hair, it's present for everybody. I live with depression, which unless you knew me well, you wouldn't know about me. So that's kind of what I was thinking.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you for your vulnerability as well. I like that you also included, it's not only how we see ourselves, but we do also identify ourselves based on how others see us, right? Based on our relationships with others as well. Thank you. Everyone's already touching on different parts that we'll be getting into, but it is complex, it is layered, and there is so much sum to our whole. Does anyone else like to speak? No pressure, just opening up the space. Okay, so let's get into talking about all the parts of you. And again, Dina and Heather, thank you for speaking on it, because you two have already said a lot of what makes you you, right? Starting from your gender, right? And gender, just to clarify as well, it's more so how someone expresses themselves, right? So gender can be very performative based on the culture that you're in, but typically within that there are similarities within that gender, such as male, female, or another identity as well. Sex, refers to the biological attributes. So they're related, but sometimes how you express yourself through, your gender doesn't match your sex, or vice versa, right? Also sexuality, right? Who you are romantically interested in. That will also define parts of you. Your age, as Heather mentioned, right? That is a whole different generational experience, right? As much as it's an individual experience, of course, millennials would be different, have different experiences than Gen Z, for example. So it's so crucial what time, and even some people, I didn't put it in here, but even astrologically, right? Those that follow horoscopes and zodiac signs, they can define who you are. Your social economic status, right? Depending on your financial availability, that would also depend on, therefore, your lifestyle and how you would identify yourself. Your ethnicity, I believe Dina mentioned, being Eritrean, right? And not only Eritrean, but also African, right? It's such a deep thing to just acknowledge culture. Your faith, I know you mentioned that as well, Dina, but absolutely, faith guides our perspectives, our morals, our values, beliefs, so much of us in that one category, right? Education as well. I know some people, they have multiple degrees or diplomas or even certificates, right? So even the layers of education and your knowledge really does impact, again, how you see yourself, but also how you see your world and others, your employment status. And this is also based on your current employment, right? If you used to work at the movie theater 10 years ago, right? But now you're working at a bank, right? You more likely would define who you are based on your current employment status than then, right? However, as an employee, there is this core of who you show up as in your employment settings. And of course, wisdom as well, which is accumulation of all things experiential. Your beliefs also define who you are, and your beliefs is more, it's a state of mind, right? It's your trust or confidence placed on a person or thing that is accepted to be true, right? So that core of what you believe in, again, this can go back to faith as well, but it can also be part of values. So values are about the beliefs that people have to what is right or wrong or what is important in life. And there's two different types of values to distinguish as well. So there's one part which is called instrumental values. And this means, what your desirable behaviors are. So such as being honest, being loving, responsible, intentional, right? That would be your value in an instrumental way. In a terminal way, this more so is about the state of a lifestyle. For example, health, freedom, family security. And you can imagine, even when we talk about that, again, that one category of values, there's so much that goes into how did they even come to be your values, right? Was it through experiential learnings of life, or was it also something that was culturally accepted, or familial values that were, that you were raised by? Also your roles and relationships, right? So Heather mentioned being a mother, right? So of course, to a certain level, that is inclusive of who you are, or being a father, a parent, a sibling, aunt, uncle, godparent, who you are in relation to someone else does define who you are, right? We are meant to connect with others, whether we grew up in a communal culture or not. As human beings, we were born to connect with others. So but naturally, we learn ourselves through others and develop ourselves through others. Self-esteem is also quite crucial to also consider who you are. So self-esteem meaning, how do you feel about yourself and the relationship you have with yourself? If I'm going too fast, please also stop me, pause me, ask questions, comments if I'm going too fast. Number 5 would be the responsibilities. So let's say you're a nurturer or a provider, or a listening ear in your friendships or romantic relationships. So the responsibilities that either are perceived or actual in your life, those would also define who you are. Of course, your interests and hobbies as well, things that you like to do. Ultimately, this also separates you from others, right? This can have its own group of itself. If someone likes to skateboard, but another person might like to swim, right? Those come with its own character, own perspectives, own groups of people, and therefore what, again, enhances the definition of you. Fashion, also, it can be related to gender expression, but it's also its own thing of itself, how you style yourself, what you feel comfortable in. Absolutely, that is part of your identity. Your emotions are also part of your identity, and they more so, they show up in a way where how you feel towards a situation typically highlights what is significant to you, right? For example, I would like to use the example if someone is to step on your shoes, right? Some people would get livid about that, especially if it's their favorite pair of shoes. They're like, okay, no. Like, my shoes are dirty, they're crusty, they're upset. So their anger might come out, right? Or frustration, right? Where other people, maybe someone steps on their shoes and they're like, oh, it's okay. Like, it's not that big of a deal. Then therefore that neutrality would more so highlight their type of personality. So emotions say so much about who we are, especially when it comes to what we feel first in a given situation. Trauma is also part of you, actually. I do tell clients, and I firmly believe that trauma does not define who you are, but it is part of your story, right? And therefore it is part of who you are. But there's ways to overcome that as well. And lastly, memories. I believe either Heather or Dina, the accumulation of memories across time, that wisdom, those experiences, those lessons, they all would create the definition of you. So many parts to it. I hope I didn't overwhelm anyone. I saw Celestine put a heart, so I'm glad things are resonating. So now I'm curious, we've defined who we are with the current understanding of who we are, right? I'm curious what makes parts of you more significant than others. And in another way, based on the different parts that we just went through, not an exhaustive list, but definitely an extensive list. Another way to phrase this question would be, what would you say truly represents who you are? And how come those would weigh heavier than other parts of you? Yeah, it's a big question. I appreciate the emoji, Dina. It is a big question. But think about it. Like, yeah, truly think about it. I'm curious to hear what reflections come up.
I think one of the things is whether people can see it or not. Is it a part of myself, like my age, that you can see? My body size, if I'm a plus-sized woman, and I wish that weren't so significant as a part of who I am, of my health, but it is, because you can't help but see it when you see me in person.
Okay. Thank you, Heather. That's a very interesting perspective. As much as who we are is developed in the relationship with other, I am curious of how come there's more significance with how other people see you and therefore how you would define yourself.
For just me or for everybody?
For you. I'm putting you on the spot a bit.
Yeah, it may be because I worry too much about what other people think. That could be part of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm deep. Now you're going to make me go deep.
I'm willing to go as deep as you are.
Yeah, it's, I guess, well, yeah. If I define myself only on what I share with others, what others see, and then am I not enough for myself?
Right. Right. Because there's, and thank you also for being so vulnerable. But yes, because that is such a limited part of your story, right? Only holding value or more significance with what other people see of you. And based on your examples, it being only physical, that is such a limited part of who you actually are, right? In the list of 20, for example, I think that would account for maybe 5 to 8 parts of you.
Wow, I never thought of it like that.
So now I think that's a good point to continue with this question. And I'm more than happy to just talk this out with you. Again, I'm willing to go where you're willing to allow us to go. But that is something that I would want you to now include in your response of what do you feel truly represents who you are?
Go back. I wrote down the list. Wait.
Okay.
I'm an artist.
Mm.
I'm doing in socioeconomic. I'm doing okay now, but that hasn't always been the case.
Mm.
I don't really have a faith practice, so that's not. It's not that it's. I see how it's important to others, but it's not something that drives me.
Right.
Okay, I can feel the difference.
You feel the
I
difference.
do.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Because I even hear the difference. But would you like to share the difference that you feel?
It's hard to describe. It's just lighter.
It's lighter. Well, that's beautiful. Beautiful. Yes, and it's I can imagine it will be lighter because now there's only one filter you're using, right? Which is you thinking about yourself or yourself. But when we're thinking about ourselves through others, which maybe people are direct and they will let you know what they think of you, but most times people aren't that direct, and you would there have to guess and interpret and just all the things that can be very stressful and overwhelming. But you knowing yourself, you filtering out, okay, what is important to me? Faith doesn't really resonate with me right now, but I can acknowledge that I've grown in my social economic status. And congratulations for that too. You going through your own experiences, you can feel growth, you can feel change, you can feel lighter. And of course that is so much more powerful to who you are and all sums of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course. You're welcome. I'm curious if anyone else would like to share. Of course, you'd be put on the spot, but I'm more than happy to be sharing space. Yes, Dina.
Hi. So I think that what makes part of your identity more significant than other parts has to do with, I guess, the parts that you prioritize, things that you prioritize, and things that you value more than others. For example, a while ago, I used to work as what do you call it? Fast food, like in fast food, and I was also a student in university. And so when I would meet people or when I would talk to people, I would never talk about my job. I would never talk about, say, oh, I'm a fast food worker. I would just say I'm in university. I identified myself as a student before ever identifying myself as anything else. And I think it's just the things maybe that you're proud of as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I also am I'm proud to I'm very proud for my family, like to be involved with my family. I have one cousin in particular that I spend a lot of time with, so I'm proud to call myself his cousin. Whereas there's just other parts of my identity that I'm just not so happy with, I guess, that I wouldn't call significant.
Mm.
So I did mention in the beginning that, part of my identity is that I'm a project coordinator, and that's not my passion. It's not something that I'm proud of. So I wouldn't go around necessarily and tell people, yeah, I identify as a project manager, coordinator, and I'm proud of it. If that makes sense. Sorry if I'm kind of all over the place.
No, I'm following. I'm
Okay.
following.
Yeah. So I do just think that it just has to do more so with maybe the parts of your identity that you're proud of, maybe more significant than other parts. For example, on your list of all that you showed us before, I think it was about 20 items we were going through, and I think one of them was emotions.
Yes.
And we were talking about like if someone stepped on your shoe, you might be angry. So then there's people who do have anger issues. There's people who do battle some sort of illnesses, or I have a friend that has bipolar disorder, for example, but he will never identify as having a mental illness or having a bipolar disorder. Do you know what I mean? Like the parts that you just don't want people to know,
Right.
you will just keep to yourself, or maybe you don't think it's that significant. Whereas the other parts you're proud of, you will share and you will gladly and proudly identify as.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Dina. It's interesting that your definition is also, it starts with a similar perspective of Heather's definition, which is thinking about others and therefore yourself, right? In terms of what you feel proud of, as much as, yes, that is based on your values and your beliefs or what you feel proud of, you're also saying it's what you feel proud to share with others would make more of who you are.
Oh, yeah. That's right. I'm just realizing that.
What do you think about that?
I'm just realizing that has to also do with others. Oh, wow. I don't know. I don't know. I feel like maybe perception is just such a big thing in today's society. Like a lot of people are maybe worried about how they are perceived by others. And so I guess I'm also worried. I didn't know that I was worried until I just brought that up. So I guess maybe I also do think about how other people think of me, and I want to share things that I guess put me in a better light, or parts of my identity that I'm proud of are more significant to me. But of course everybody has negative aspects of their identity probably, but it's not that it has to always be shared anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
That's another part too, in terms of also, just because you feel proud of certain things doesn't mean those things that you focus on only make who you are, right?
Yes.
Your shadows can also make who you are as well. Your secrets also make who you are. But what you choose to share is what you choose to share, right? I also want to normalize too, because of course, we are meant to attach, right? So we'll, to some level, always consider somebody, whether it be a stranger, parent, sibling, partner. We're considering someone in our lives when we think about ourselves. So it is normal to be like, okay, what do I want to share with others? How do others think about me? But the point that I just want to highlight is when that becomes how you shape yourself, then again, that's very limiting to who you are in various ways. It's also limiting to how much you understand yourself. Yes. So I'm curious now that there's light shine, that you're still considering other people's perspectives. Let me know a bit more, Dina, in that way of what is truly representative of you.
Sorry, what was that?
Let me know more of what you feel is truly representative of you and what makes that way more than others.
So I don't know. For my own identity,
Mhm.
I think part of the important parts of my identity that maybe I value more than others has to do with how I was raised.
Mm.
So, like for example, my parents are very Christian, and we are Eritrean, and we're very we're very involved with the Eritrean community. There's quite a big Eritrean community in Toronto, and growing up, we would always gather, whether it's festivals, events, sports, different things like that. So I've been going to these things for years. And I guess over time, it's kind of just instilled in me. Like, I go to church as well. Sorry, I didn't mention that because my parents Christian. We were always going to church. And although I don't even go to church now, it's strange because I still strongly identify myself as a Christian and as um, very Eritrean, like very involved in the community. So
Mhm.
I think that's just an example of how maybe my childhood could affect my perception now of
Right.
myself.
Yes. And I think that that goes back to the point of we have the core of who we are, right? But the core of who we are, it just develops as we get older, as we experience different things in life, as we experience different fields of working and, et cetera. That can change. But at core, you being Eritrean will probably never change. Right? Um, that is who you are. Can you embrace other cultures? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But in terms of it defining you, it typically is at core, your culture is what it is, what you're born into. Um, the values, your beliefs. Again, as much as those can change, as the mind change, faith, we can start with a certain faith, but maybe again we experience different things in life that changes our belief systems. Ultimately, what you're saying is the values, the beliefs, and emotions really define who you are. And I want to highlight because those three things have very little to do with other people outside of your parents, right? But
Mm-hmm.
they're more so you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Yes. Thank you for sharing. I
Thanks.
know Heather, of course. I know Heather mentioned in the chat that I think social media has influenced what we see as significant about our identity. Absolutely. If we only share on social media what parts of our identity we are proud of. Yes. Yes. Social media is such the biggest filter of a snapshot. This is what I'm happy with. This is my life. This is my identity 24/7, 365. It's true. It really has influenced what we see as significant. So therefore, if people are showing, okay, their value is traveling, right? Now, other people might feel like, okay, so that has to be part of my identity. Now I need to travel. I need to see this beach in Jamaica. I need to see this beach in Thailand, right? I need to go here in order for me to feel like I'm living up to the expectations of others ultimately. But thank you for that input. Social media is it's so interesting because as much as it is beneficial. It is absolutely beneficial, and there's so many ways to use it to develop our sense of identity, right? It can also be so deteriorating depending on the perspective that we're watching the same content, right? Someone can watch, for example, a blog of someone traveling to Bali, right? And I'm saying Bali because I want to go there. But I could watch that vlog and either take it as educational or take it as comparative, right? That also says a lot about my identity. I would watch a vlog and be like, okay, I want to travel there because I want to eat that food. I want to experience that temple. I want to experience that culture, right? And just that inner peace as a culture. Or someone could say, well, I want to travel here because this person did that, or because it's the in thing. Everyone is going there now. She looks so happy. I want to be there now. So also, it's sometimes not even, the fact of social media or something external of ourselves, but how we use that information, how we approach that information. Oh, and Tina mentioned, 1 second. So also one's physical identity, it goes back to appearance. Yes, people tend to compare themselves to these influencers and then have things done to their body to the point where they're unrecognizable even to themselves. Yes. Yes. And that's interesting. Did I mention I don't even think I mentioned physical. I guess gender is in a physical sense, but absolutely. I know Heather gave the example of, her body type. It's true. The physical appearance, it's taking up such a large part of society, and both men, women, people as a whole are really being impacted to how they should see themselves, how they should present themselves, and feel like they can't be happy with who they are, right? Talking about Black History Month, being a Black individual, right? It's such a journey of an experience, yet a lifestyle of how comfortable are you in your skin based on what you see. And I'm so happy that there's so happy is an understatement, to be honest, but I'm overjoyed that there's so much more content on social media just highlighting melanin and the different shades of melanin and the different body types of melanin, that it does enhance your spirit to be like, oh no, I'm magic. Thank you for the hearts. But yes, like, oh, I'm magic. Like, I can really feel my skin. I can feel my identity. I can be curvy and know how to feel myself. I can be voluptuous and know how to feel myself. I can be fit. I can be skinny. I can be small. And know how to feel myself, right? I can be light brown, dark brown. Just, you can be you. You can be you. And still know how to feel yourself because of different social media content as well. But you're so right. You're so right, Dina. Thank you. And with that, I also want to, give ways to how you can get to the core of you, right? I appreciate both of you being very vulnerable with me and allowing me to kind of pick your brains a little bit and reframe and support, really. So thank you for doing that. And this is only the start of the reflection, right? But other ways to get to the core of you, one would be spending time in nature, right? And this is for those that ultimately need grounding. This is for those that are spiritual. This is for those that feel they're often in survival mode, essentially, right? So being in survival mode, we ultimately we can't learn. And if we can't learn, then we're not understanding who we are. We're not learning who we are. We're not exploring who we are. So being in nature is such a powerful environment to surround yourself with. It helps with presence, it helps with grounding, and ultimately through those body experiences, you feel yourself more and therefore can define yourself more. Also spending time alone. So yes, spend time alone, but don't make it a lifestyle, right? I know some clients tend to think that they have to heal in isolation, and that's not true. Again, I've been reiterating throughout this whole webinar that we are beings of attachment, right? We do need to connect with people, but just pay attention who you're connecting with, right? If you're connecting with people that make you feel like you're losing your sense of self, whether perceived or actual, they make you feel that way, then be mindful of who you're surrounding yourself with. But ultimately, we need time to ourselves, right? If we're too consumed by who we're surrounded by, then how will we get to, for example, number 3 is reflect, right? We need time to reflect. That's you, that you know your own experiences, you know your own secrets, you know your emotions, values, beliefs, so many things. You would know that. And when we're just going through life, through relationships, you know, that the quickness of what it can all include would hinder us getting to the core of ourselves. Also building your self-esteem. If you do tend to have low self-esteem, we do have a webinar actually that talks about self-esteem and different techniques of building it. So I will put it in the comment section. I'm also going to actually just include it in the chat as well. For those that are curious on how to build your self-esteem, it is so crucial for learning who you are. Because again, it's the relationship you have with yourself, right? The 5th one is about setting boundaries. So again, we're going to be interacting with people. We're going to be in relationships with people. We have work to tend to, right? Boundaries are so crucial. But at the same time, it's not only the boundaries that you have with others, it's also the boundaries that you put on yourself, right? If you know you're at a certain capacity for your day, your week, your month, year, in any sense of the word, honoring your boundaries also highlights what's important to you. It also highlights who you are. We do have a webinar talking about boundaries and how to set your boundaries, and I have included that in the chat as well, and I will include it in the comment section so that you can develop more of those techniques. I've also included number 6 is become familiar with intentionality. Right. So again, originally both the two of you had the idea that identity involves others' perspective first and you're second, if at all. Right. So being intentional about how you define yourself would broaden the perspective of how you define yourself. Right. Because when we limit ourselves, we can feel not good about ourselves in its simplest terms, not confident, right? Not secure of who we are. But being intentional, we can go through the parts of who we are. Okay, this is how I feel about this, and it all feels more empowering. It feels lighter, as Heather mentioned. So being intentional in how you do get to the core of you would ultimately also help get to the core of you. Any questions before I go to the other slide? Okay. Oh, yes. Dina, go ahead.
It's not a question, it's just a comment. I really do agree with all that you've put down here. I just wanted to share that I felt like during COVID, when it was not only COVID for me, but I also was dealing with a breakup. So I did spend a lot of time alone. I did spend time in nature a lot. I went on a lot of walks. I also like to just ride my bike and sit down in a park by myself sometimes. COVID really was a negative thing in our lives, but in that sense of kind of, I guess, finding myself, I had a lot of time to think, a lot of time to just do things that made me feel better and learn more about myself. So yeah, I just wanted to share that I really resonate with what you've put down here.
Thank you, Dina. I appreciate that, and I always like to hear about various experiences that happened in COVID, during COVID, and I've heard both. I've heard COVID, the pandemic really just broke people down. Gave a whole new perspective to life that was typically negative. It really blossomed for a lot of people, newfound anxiety and depression and trauma, self-esteem concerns, identity. Like it really triggered a lot for people. However, I've also heard stories of people that they needed that time. They needed that time to not go outside for a bit, to and relationships to kind of check where they're at in life. Just develop their own sense of self and world for themselves, right? So it absolutely, and it did have in that way certain benefits, because as I believe you are the one that mentioned, life is so much about perspective. But again, ultimately, we do need that time alone. Hopefully, it not being triggered by a pandemic to access that time for ourselves. I'm laughing, but it's actually not that funny. But we do need time for ourselves intentionally, right? But I do hear you, and I thank you for sharing that narrative. Yeah. What I would also say is another way to get to the core of you is, of course, psychotherapy as well. For those that are open to seeing a therapist, in case getting to the core of you it is challenging and it is a process. There's two styles that I find really specifically hone in on identity. All of the theoretical approaches out there, they support the parts of you, and therefore that is part of your identity to make the sum, to make the whole of your identity. However, I find narrative therapy, which is a style of therapy that helps people become, right? So it's about embracing and being an expert in your own life. So through this form of therapy, it's a really emphasis on stories that you develop and that you carry with you throughout your life, right? So essentially your beliefs about yourself, the narratives that you tell yourself, the meanings that you make from that. It would be assuming the narrative is not fitting your life, it's not developing as you develop in your life. It would be about the experience and the interactions of rewriting your story. Right? And especially as people of color, as Black people, we often talk in a story way, in a narrative way. Traditionally, that's how we passed on wisdom, is through stories. So it is so powerful, how we talk to ourselves and what we believe from the narratives that we tell ourselves. Another form of therapy that is quite beneficial and directed toward identity is as existential therapy. And I'm sure you must have heard of like existential crisis, right? That is such a common term or phrase used, but it's also a very real thing. And existential, it refers to your existence, right? As in what it means to you to be a human being. Existential therapy, it's an extension of this line of thinking, and it's very philosophical in the approach. So there is a lot of depth to it, but it's also it can be very vague as well, right? So there's typically 4 key concepts in its existential therapy, which is freedom, death, isolation, and meaninglessness, right? So when it comes to people coming in with an existential crisis, for example, or just, identity concerns of who they are, the goal with this form of therapy would be to find meaning and purpose in your life. Right. There's a lot of confrontation of values, a lot of confrontation of beliefs, emotions, even relationships, right? But ultimately, it's getting to how you can define your life through meaning and purpose, right? And again, ultimately, only you have that answer through exploration. I believe that is, yes, that is one of the last slides. Does anyone have any like general questions or comments? I'm happy to open up the space.
I don't
Can
have
you say it? Oh, go ahead, Dina. I'm sorry.
I love how we both chose to speak at the exact time.
I know. Great timing. Oh, I believe Heather allowed you to speak, Dina, if you're open to it.
Hello?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Sorry. Yeah, sorry. It looks like I got disconnected for a second
Oh,
or
okay.
something. No, Heather, you go ahead. I actually didn't have a question. I was just going to make a comment. So you can go ahead.
Oh, my only question was the existential therapy. You said freedom, death, isolation, and what was the fourth thing?
Meaninglessness.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yes, yes. So those tend to be the core of the therapeutic approaches and different. Sometimes it's the foundation of what people come in with. Sometimes people are experiencing existential crisis because of freedom, right? They want freedom, they yearn for freedom, or don't even know how to define it. Or maybe it's death, right? Or meaninglessness, and they're not feeling like they have purpose in their life. Yeah.
Thank you.
Of course, you're welcome.
I was just going to say that it's been a very great discussion, and this is my first time, like I said, joining one of these, and I usually have a problem kind of sharing my thoughts and opinions and speaking with other people. So I'm really glad. I'm really thankful for being a part of this, and happy for the way that you carried this session, this webinar.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dina. I'm glad that you got something from this experience. And Heather as well, thank you for your heart. Absolutely. I mean, again, not only because it's Black History Month, but in general, it's so important to just check in on who you feel you are and your sense of self, right? Because ultimately, it can always linger in the back of our minds, but we do need to confront it to truly have that sense of identity.
Yes.
Thank you for attending. Yes. And I have our information here for those that would like to continue the discussion on your sense of self and your identity, or any other further questions that you may have, right? Truly, thank you so much for the both of you, and for those that are watching the recorded version. Thank you so much for watching and joining me.
Of course. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a lovely day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.